You people always want saving, Douglas Crane sneered, his voice cold enough to silence the whole room. But some of you were never worth saving. Those words still echoed in Elena's mind when she uncovered the truth buried beneath her $1 house, a secret so dangerous it could bring down the city's most powerful man. What began as a desperate attempt to rebuild her life soon became a fight for survival, justice, and something far more fragile: hope. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear from you. The mailbox downstairs was stuffed. Elena pulled out a small stack, flipped through the familiar logos: electric company rent reminder, an envelope with red ink warning her of possible account suspension. No surprises, but each one still landed like fresh weight. The bus arrived late. A few blocks down, she got off at Price Smart, punched in behind the register. The manager, Janice, barely looked up. "You're 7 minutes behind," Janice muttered. "Again." Elena offered a nod, already tying her apron. The rest of the shift dragged. Elena moved through it automatically, scanning cereal boxes, bagging diapers, nodding at regulars who didn't bother learning her name. One coworker ignored her completely at the break room table. By late morning, a man with thick glasses and a veteran's cap placed 2 cans of beans on the counter. He watched her scan them, then asked, "You planning to stay around here long?" She looked up, not sure if he was flirting or just bored. He smiled gently. "They're practically giving houses away on Maple Street. $1, they say. Looks haunted, though." At the end of her shift, Elena peeled the apron from her back like it weighed more than cotton. She tucked the bills into her coat pocket and walked to pick Jonah up. Jonah ran toward her from the school gate, backpack thudding behind him. "Mom, mister, Gavin let us draw haunted houses today. I drew ours." She ruffled his hair. "This one's not haunted, just tired." On the way home, they passed the empty lot again. 4 houses, all boarded, one with a tree growing sideways through the porch. Chain-link fencing leaned like it was too tired to stand. The folding chair under Elena wobbled each time she shifted. Someone had carved initials into the back, the plastic rough against her fingers. The room wasn't large, just an old hall borrowed from a nearby church. Jonah sat beside her, feet swinging, coloring on a brochure with a dull pencil. His backpack rested at her feet, open and half unzipped. A sock poked out from inside. She leaned down and zipped it quietly, trying not to draw attention. The murmur of voices rose as people kept filing in, mostly older residents with grocery bags. A few men in work boots, one woman still wearing her uniform from a fast food place. A staffer in a navy blazer tapped the mic, flinched at the feedback, then forced a grin. "Thank you for coming to the Ward 9 community meeting. Tonight we'll discuss the city's redevelopment plan and new housing incentives." No one applauded. Someone coughed. Another muttered, "Same speech, different month." Elena straightened her skirt. She'd come hoping for a rent break or small grant, anything that might let her breathe. The side door opened. Cameras clicked. Mayor Douglas Crane walked in, his coat perfect, his smile practiced. "Good evening," he began, voice smooth and confident. "Detroit is rising again. Together we'll bring our neighborhoods back to life." A few polite nods, mostly blank faces. His aide passed out pamphlets: city renewal program, $1 homes for hardworking citizens. Elena read it twice, unsure if she believed it. The mayor talked about investment, community, and rebirth. She'd heard those words before, always followed by higher rent and broken promises. When the floor opened for questions, a man grumbled about potholes. A mother asked about trash pickup. Then silence. Elena stood, hands trembling. "I'm Elena Marsh. I lost my job last year. I'm raising a 6-year-old alone. I can't keep up with rent. I just need to know if there's help for people like me." A woman behind her muttered, "If everyone wants free housing, who'll pay the taxes?" Laughter spread. Crane's smile thinned. "We appreciate your concern, Miss Marsh. The city's funds must prioritize those willing to invest sweat equity. We can't save everyone, but perhaps you'll consider our new ownership opportunities." Ownership. The word stung, but she nodded and sat down. Jonah, drawing in his notebook, glanced up, sensing this shift in her tone. Crane moved on, the room filled with the scrape of chairs and the faint hum of coffee being poured. Elena stared at the cracked floor tiles. If help wouldn't come, she'd have to find a way out herself. She left before the meeting ended. People watched her go, some curious, some tired. Rain speckled the steps as she and Jonah waited for the bus. On the ride home, she listened to two men behind her. $1 for a house, one said. Bet it's crawling with rats, Maple Street, the other replied. They say it's haunted. Elena caught her reflection, pale, thinner than she remembered. That night, she heated soup while Jonah stacked crackers into towers. After dinner, she flattened a pile of bills against the counter until the paper felt worn, then pulled a crumpled receipt from her pocket and scribbled one line, 44 Maple Street. She didn't know why she wrote it. Maybe it was just something to remind herself that chances, no matter how small, still existed. The next afternoon, walking Jonah home from school, she turned onto Maple Street. 4 houses stood in a row, roofs bowed, porches slanting. One had a rusted swing still hanging, another a crooked sign for sale, city property, $1. The paint had faded to a dull pink. Jonah peered through the fence. Is this one of the haunted ones? Probably, she said, half smiling. He tossed a pebble against the siding. It rolled back to his shoes. Elena touched the sign, the cold metal rough beneath her palm. Can we go home, Mom? He asked. She nodded, and they walked on the sign, creaking faintly behind them. The papers landed on the clerk's desk with a flat slap. Without looking up, the woman shoved them across the glass. 1 year to bring it up to code, she said. No plumbing, no heat. You fix it, or it goes back to the city, Elena signed. I understand. No one lasts past winter, the woman added, already turning away. Maple Street looked the same, silent abandon, caught between past and promise. Jonah ran ahead toward the porch like they were checking into a hotel. The key turned harder than expected. She had to press her shoulder to the door. It opened with a wheeze and a flurry of dust. Jonah ducked past her, calling dibs on the room with the least broken window. She followed slowly, eyes adjusting to the shadows and the years of stillness. The floor groaned under her boots. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, a yellowed calendar, still pinned to October 2004. On the counter, a chipped ashtray sat beside an unopened letter addressed to a name she didn't know. Mom, I have my own closet. Jonah's voice bounced through the hall. She smiled faintly, opened the fridge out of habit, empty, except for rust and the faint smell of mold. Upstairs, a small bedroom still held a bed frame. She pulled away the sheet, revealing bare springs. In the hall closet, behind a few coats gone soft with mildew, she found a wooden box. It held a photo of 3 people in front of the same house, one cradling a baby. Beneath it, a folded newspaper from 2002, headlines about city budgets and a missing contractor. At the bottom lay a small brass key, edges dark with rust. She turned it in her hand, slipped it into her jacket pocket, and kept moving. By late afternoon, the living room was clear enough for Jonah to sit and color. She boiled water on a camping stove, poured 2 mugs, stepped out to the porch, and noticed someone on the roof next door. A man crouched by the chimney, hammer in hand, moving easily across the shingles. When he caught her watching, he called down, You really planning to live there? I already do, she answered. He came down the ladder, crossed the yard, and offered his hand. Noah Reed, fixing up my uncle's place. Elena Marsh. You got power, not yet. Need help. He showed her the fuse box, corroded beyond repair, offered a spare part from his truck. Minutes later, the kitchen light flickered on. She thanked him with a mug of coffee gone cold. They sat on paint buckets while Jonah slept nearby, thumb pressed to his cheek. Noah leaned back. This street used to be something. My mom grew up here. Candy store on the corner. Then it fell apart. Feels like no one's come back, she said. They haven't, he replied. Maybe they will. She had no answer. He left before dark, promising to find her a working heater. She locked up, turned toward the stairs, then stopped. A metallic scrape came from below. Not loud, but deliberate. She listened again. Something shifted against concrete. Her eyes went to the basement door. Hand on the knob, she hesitated. Old house, she thought. Pipes. Maybe raccoons. Jonah stirred. She tucked his blanket tighter, sat at the table, and opened her notebook. Things to repair: leaks in the roof corners, marked by mildew. Halfway down the list, the brass key caught her eye. She picked it up, traced its teeth with her thumb, then laid it beside the page and kept writing. A plain envelope lay on the counter, her name stamped in block letters. No return address. She tore it open while the kettle clicked off. The letter was short, official, almost cold. The house at 44 Maple Street carried 10 years of unpaid taxes. Unless she could show proof of major repairs before the season's end, the city would reclaim it. She read the letter twice fast, then slow, hoping the words might change. That week she worked until her hands ached. Noah showed up each morning bringing tools or plywood without being asked. He replaced the roof shingles, fixed the front step, and patched leaks until dusk. They talked between hammer blows, words short unguarded. "You ever think of leaving?" she asked while scraping paint. "Sure," he said. "Then I remember I still owe this place something. Why? Because I left once already, and when I came back it looked like this." She didn't ask more, and he didn't explain. Jonah helped by picking up nails and switching radio stations for Noah. After days of repairs, they finally climbed to the attic. Elena had avoided it, no reason, just instinct. Dust hung in the rafters, the air stale but calm. Behind a stack of warped boards, she found a small metal box. It creaked open, revealing a worn leather notebook filled with neat handwriting, names and numbers. First names only, some followed by large sums. She passed it to Noah. He scanned the pages, frowning. "Bad news," he murmured. "What kind? I've seen lists like this before. When I worked for the city, records like these meant trouble. So what do? I'd put it back and forget it." He left early that day. By evening, Jonah slept on the couch, a comic book across his chest. The notebook sat hidden under a shopping bag by the chair. While washing dishes, a knock startled her. A man stood on the porch wearing a city inspector's badge coat, 2 clean shoes spotless. "Just checking properties," he said. "Old houses keep secrets. You'd be surprised what people leave behind." Her grip on the door tightened. "We're fine. Mind if I take a look?" "I do." He smiled like someone testing a lock. "Of course. Let us know if anything turns up." Door closed, her hand stayed on the knob. After checking every latch, she saw the bag was gone. The chair sat empty, the notebook missing. Searched again, drawers, pantry trash. Everything untouched except that one spot. The diner TV murmured above the counter, low but steady. Elena wiped a clean table again, pretending to chase crumbs. The place buzzed with worn-out talk, truckers, night workers, a few men in suits avoiding home. When Janice turned the volume up, voices thinned. Mayor Douglas Crane stood behind a row of microphones, smiling like a man rehearsing permanence. Banners for the city renewal program filled the frame. "Detroit is coming back," he announced. "Families are returning. Neighborhoods once forgotten are thriving again. People like us hard-working citizens are rebuilding this city one home at a time." The phrase "people like us" stung. Elena set the rag down. Janice caught her eye. "What's with you?" "Nothing. Just tired." Applause filled the diner speakers. Elena laughed under her breath, quick and brittle. A man at the counter frowned. "What's funny?" "The part where he says it's working." She turned away before anyone could reply. Next morning, a white city van idled by the curb. 2 men stepped out with clipboards. One called it a routine check. "We've had reports of unauthorized renovation. You got a permit?" "It's part of the Dollar House program," she said. "Everything's filed with the housing office." He kept writing. "Still need to verify. You've got a child living here." She nodded. "Then you should be more careful. Wiring's exposed, foundations unstable, and this basement door doesn't seal. Unsafe for a minor." The second man taped a notice to the post. "What's that?" she asked. "Temporary suspension of work. You can't stay here until the city clears it. That could take weeks." "That's not my department." Anger rose sharp in her throat. "You can't just—" He cut her off with a look that ended the rest. "Take it up with City Hall." The van drove off, leaving the word "unsafe" bleeding red on the paper. Noah came by that evening, tool belt slung over his shoulder. "Heard they stopped your permit. They said the place is too dangerous." "Guess that makes me dangerous too." "You want me to talk to someone? I still know people downtown." I don't need more eyes on me." He paused, then offered, "Let me store your supplies. Inspectors will take them next time." They packed the boxes together. When the truck was loaded, Noah leaned on the fence. "You'll get through this. That's what people say when they don't know what's next." He didn't argue, just nodded and left. The house felt hollow again. Elena sat at the table where bills formed a small tower. Her diner apron lay folded on top. Janice had let her go that afternoon. Budget cuts. Jonah coughed in his sleep. She checked his forehead, hot and damp. The thermometer blinked weakly. While searching for fever medicine, a heavy thud came from below. Not a creak. Metal dragged across concrete. Her hand stilled on the drawer. The sound came again, slow, measured. She grabbed the flashlight. Its beam trembled across her knuckles. Jonah shifted but didn't wake. Each step toward the basement was careful, her breath caught halfway. The latch rattled softly in her grip. Another scrape came from below. Noah arrived just before 8 with 2 thermoses and a pry bar under his arm. He handed her coffee without a word and went straight to the back hall. "Where's the leak again?" he asked, crouching near the basement hatch. "Came from under the sink, then nothing," Elena replied. "But the floor feels damp sometimes. Might be a slow pipe." He nodded, already tugging at the edge of the floorboards. "Let's take a look. If it's copper, I can patch it." The hatch resisted, swollen from damp and time. They peeled away the warped boards, uncovering a patch of cement, paler than the rest, too clean to be old. Noah frowned. "That's not original." Elena crouched, pressing her palm to the surface. "Cold but recent. Something under here. Maybe an old drain," he said. "Or something someone didn't want found." He brushed off his jeans. "I'd leave it alone." She studied the uneven edge. "No, let's see." He hesitated, then knelt again. "Your call." The cement chipped, slow, stubborn. Beneath it, a rusted iron hatch sat welded shut. "Quite a cover for bad plumbing," Noah muttered. She traced the seam, noticing how deliberate the seal was. He fetched a grinder from his truck while she cleared debris. Jonah slept upstairs, oblivious to the grind and dust below. When the weld finally broke, the hatch groaned open. A damp smell rose. Noah shone the flashlight down. Narrow steps led to a concrete room no bigger than a closet. A few rusted safes lined along one wall. They didn't enter, just stood above. "This doesn't belong in a house like this," he said. "Then what is it old shell companies used to hide cash records, whatever needed to disappear? When things went bad, they'd torch the place." Her pulse quickened. "You think that's what this is?" He didn't answer. "We should tell someone. If you do, it won't stop at inspectors. You'll get the kind who don't knock. What if there's still something in there? Then it's someone else's secret, and whoever buried it won't like being uncovered." He looked at her. "If you find papers, names, anything strange, keep it quiet. And don't trust anyone from the city." She half smiled. "You were part of the city, that's why I know." They sealed the hatch just enough to keep the smell down. Dust clung to their sleeves. Noah didn't linger, said he had errands, and left. She washed her hands, the scent still on her skin. Jonah built towers from cereal boxes, humming softly. The curtain had caught on a nail. She freed it, stood still, fingers resting on the sill. Nothing outside had changed, but the house felt tilted aware. She turned toward the back hall. The patched floor looked uneven where the boards had been disturbed. By morning, the heaviness had faded a little. The bread was dry, but Jonah didn't complain. Elena spread peanut butter to the edges, cut it into triangles, slipped an old juice box into his backpack, and folded the top tight. They left on foot. Clouds hung low and gray. Jonah walked a few steps ahead, kicking a pine cone, humming the jingle from school. At the crosswalk, he looked up. "Do you think we'll still be here next year?" he asked. Elena adjusted his collar. "Let's get through this week first." He nodded like that was enough. Back home, she wrote down what they needed: light bulbs, dish soap, plywood. The list looked longer when she read it out loud. Noah showed up around 10 with a pair of gloves and a roll of chicken wire. "The fence is trying to quit again," he said. "Figured we should talk it out." They worked mostly in silence, hammer, staple, measure, adjust. Jonah's toy truck jammed between 2 boards. Elena tossed it aside with a quiet laugh. Lunch was grilled cheese, edges burnt. Noah finished his anyway. Then he took Jonah to the hardware store, claiming the kid needed lessons in bargaining. Elena stayed behind, cleaned the counters, folded mismatched towels, and dragged a broken chair to the curb. By mid-afternoon, a few neighborhood kids showed up. Someone turned on a small radio, spitting old rock tunes. Elena joined with a trash bag and gloves too big for her hands. They filled bins with cans, wrappers, and bits of forgotten junk. One girl handed her a daisy that had grown through a tire. Elena stuck it in a jelly jar on the steps. Jonah came home full of stories about Noah getting lost in the plumbing aisle. They argued over who found cheaper sandpaper. She let them. That evening, rice and beans passed for dinner. Jonah had 2 bowls, announcing he was training for something important. Noah leaned on the railing, sipping store-brand lemonade. "This block used to have a bakery," he said, nodding toward the boarded laundromat. "What happened? Time. People leaving and forgetting to come back. Maybe they'll remember now." Maybe. Jonah fell asleep over his spelling words. Elena carried him to bed, paused in the doorway, as his breathing steadied, one hand resting over his cheek. Downstairs she sat with a mug of warm water. The street felt quiet, not peaceful, just paused. Then she saw it. A dark sedan parked at the far end of the block, engine off, headlights aimed straight ahead. No movement, no door opening, just stillness. She waited until the lights dimmed. The car rolled backwards, slow and deliberate, before turning the corner and vanishing. Her hand stayed on the curtain longer than needed. The mug had gone cold, heavier somehow. She crossed out light bulbs on the grocery list. They'd keep using the hallway lamp for now. Upstairs, one floorboard creaked and settled. On the table, the daisy tilted toward the dark. Elena exhaled through her nose, rolled her shoulders, and reached for the half-folded laundry on the couch. It started as a faint tapping, slow, even like something brushing along the wall, just after midnight when the house usually held its breath. By the third night, she was already awake before it began. Jonah slept through it, as always. Elena stood by his door sock, half on listening. The sound came from the east wall near the pantry, where the floor had never sat right. Noah showed up the next morning. He didn't need her to explain. He saw it in her face before she said a word. "It's probably just old ductwork," he offered, prying off the wooden trim. "Might be animals, or something loose behind here." The screwdriver hit something harder than plaster. Noah adjusted his grip and worked the edge until a narrow panel gave way, revealing a hollow just wide enough for an arm. Bundled wires, dusty folders, and a faint chemical scent drifted out. "You'll want to see this," he said. He pulled out a stack of sealed envelopes, the ink on them faded but legible: City Fund, 2008. Beneath them typed headers and names one repeated often. Douglas Crane. Elena's fingers twitched as if touching a live wire. These were hidden. Noah stayed quiet. She skimmed one envelope: financial records, grant approvals for projects that never happened. Her chest tightened. "This house wasn't random," she whispered. "You think he's still covering it up? I don't think he ever stopped." That afternoon, a knock, steady, deliberate. A man in a gray windbreaker stood at the door, badge swinging from his neck. "Elena Marsh." "Yes, building oversight. Routine check." Noah stepped out with the recycling. The man's gaze flicked to him, then back. "Any unusual finds during renovation? Wiring, blueprints, sealed spaces?" "Nothing more than dust," she said evenly. He smiled without warmth. "Good. People here sometimes stumble on things they don't understand." Noah watched him go. "He's no inspector. I've met their team. He knew my name." "Yeah," Noah said, jaw tightening. "That's the problem." That night, Elena spread the documents across the kitchen table, numbers she didn't grasp but felt mattered. She slipped Crane's folder into a plastic bag and hid it behind the freezer tray, stashing the rest beneath the stairs. Jonah wandered in, half asleep. "What's for dinner?" "Grilled cheese," she said, and his grin made it sound like good news. Later, after dishes and bedtime stories, she sat by the pantry wall, back to the wood. The house felt like it was holding its breath. No tapping, only a dense stillness pressing from below. Noah had offered to take her and Jonah away. "You could think there," he'd said. She hadn't answered then. Now she checked the freezer again. The plastic bag was still there. A floorboard creaked above. She glanced up. The quiet had changed, less peace, more waiting. It felt like the house wanted a reply. Elena leaned her shoulder against the hatch. It didn't move. Noah slid the crowbar in deeper. Welded halfway, he muttered, then gave one sharp push. The seal gave with a hard crack. Metal groaned. Dust rolled up, heavy with rust. She covered her nose and peered down. The safe went deeper than she'd thought. 3 shelves of sealed folders, a small box, and a hard drive wrapped in cloth. Her fingers lifted the folders before she could think. Account statements, transfer slips, photocopied checks, all neatly stapled. A photo clipped to one file caught her breath. Douglas Crane laughing beside 4 suited men under a banner reading Metro Renewal Fund. Noah's hand stopped the picture from slipping. His jaw set tight. At the bottom corner, she saw his name printed under the group photo. "You were part of this." "I was a contractor," he said. "Inspection reports, nothing else. I didn't know what they were doing." She kept turning pages. The dates lined up with the housing crash, then the money trail went blank. "I left when I found out," he said. "They hid the money in demo properties, funneled it through ghost accounts and fake charities." I spoke up. They called me a liability. You said this house was a vault. Yeah, and you just opened it. Elena stared at the hard drive. She didn't need to plug it in. The house hadn't been random, it had been chosen because no one was meant to come back. We take it somewhere safe, Noah said. She nodded, wrapping the drive in Jonah's old baby blanket and tucking it into her backpack. They packed the files fast. He swept the flashlight once more around the basement. When they reached the front door, it wouldn't open. The handle stuck firm, locked. Noah tried beside her. Wasn't like that before. She moved to the kitchen window. Across the street, a dark car idled, one headlight flickering. A shape sat behind the wheel, still as stone. They know. Looks like it. We have to move. The crawl space, he said. Back through the basement. It comes out by the fence. She nodded but went first to the coat closet. From behind the board games, she pulled an old emergency box, 3 granola bars, 2 bottles of water, and a burner phone she hadn't touched in months. She powered it on. Noah came back. Crawl space is clear. Once we're out, we split. You take Jonah. I'll draw them off. You're not leaving with the drive. I wasn't planning to. Her hands trembled as she zipped the backpack. Upstairs, Jonah stirred, but didn't wake. Elena bent to kiss his forehead and tucked his arms under the blanket. We go in 10 minutes. She stood by the counter, staring at the stove, as if waiting for something to boil. Her thoughts circled not around Crane or the files, but that first day in the community hall when asking for help had felt like begging. Now she held proof people vanished. She slid the folders into the freezer between pizza rolls and half-melted ice cream. The drive stayed in her bag. Floorboards creaked in the hallway. Noah froze. Elena didn't breathe. Then came the knock, sharp before the kettle clicked off. She wiped her hands on a towel as 2 officers appeared at the door. One flipped open a notepad. The other peered past her into the house. We've received a report, the older said evenly, that this property may contain stolen materials. We'll need you to come with us. I haven't stolen anything. Ma'am, please gather your things. Jonah peeked from the hallway, clutching his blanket. She crouched, whispered something in his ear, kissed his forehead, and stepped out without her coat. At the precinct, they left her in a narrow room with no clock. The chair wobbled. The window was painted shut. A man in plain clothes entered, dropped a folder on the table, and sat across from her, calm, rehearsed, certain. Ms. Marsh, he began, opening the file. There's reason to believe you possess evidence tied to a federal case. Her jaw tightened. I found papers in a house I legally bought. We're not debating property law. We're here to keep you out of trouble. He leaned in. Hand over what you've got and this goes away. You mean like the grant money? His expression didn't change. You're a single mother, no record. Don't start a fight you can't win. I want my son. He stood without replying and left. Minutes passed before someone else entered, clipboard in hand, and told her she could go. No explanation, no Jonah. On the bus, a mother got on with 2 restless kids. Elena watched the smaller one too long, then looked away. The house met her with silence and ruin. Drawers, gaping mattress, half-off picture frames, shattered, even Jonah's old toys scattered across the floor. She dropped her keys and didn't pick them up. Noah didn't answer his phone. Not once. Not after 3 tries. She sat on the torn rug, elbows on her knees. Part of her wanted to leave. Take a bus, West change. Her name disappeared before they remade her into someone else. But Jonah's face stayed with her. How he'd looked at her when they took her away. How he hadn't cried. From her jacket pocket, she pulled the one thing they hadn't found, the flash drive wrapped in an old scarf. Her laptop groaned, a wake screen cracked at the corner. She plugged in the drive. A single folder appeared. City Fund Backup. PDFs filled the screenboard. Members, pastors, fake companies, wire transfers running through offshore banks. Then came the emails. Subject lines, final disbursement, audit cover, property clearance. One photo showed Douglas Crane raising a glass among investors. Another listed house number 44 beneath asbestos and roofing subsidies. She scrolled faster, breath uneven until words blurred. The heater clanked on. From down the hall, a floorboard shifted. She froze. No footsteps followed, only the faint hum of a house that seemed to listen. Then she saw it, a line in one email, short and clean. Keep 44 closed until after election. Use Marsh if necessary, no ties, no threat. Her hand dropped. They'd known her name before she knew theirs. Elena hunched over the desk, the cursor blinking like a pulse. She copied the folder to 2 blank drives just in case. The progress bar crawled. She wrote Grace Liu's email on a torn receipt and attached the files with a single line. I think this connects to the missing redevelopment funds. Please be careful. She hit send, then deleted the message from her outbox. The rest of the day passed in scattered chores she couldn't recall doing. Jonah was still gone, the silence in the house thick and odd. Noah hadn't returned her last call. Then came the smoke, a dull hiss from the back wall, then the crackle, then the heat. She ran for the door, but flames had already swallowed the rear hallway. Heat licked the ceiling like it knew exactly where she stood. She backed up fast, coughing into her sleeve heart, thudding without rhythm. The front door burst open. Noah's voice cut through the haze. Elena. She didn't wait. Grabbed her jacket, shoved the flash drive into her pocket and sprinted toward him. His arms caught her around the shoulders and dragged her past the porch as the fire flared brighter behind them. They stood in the street, breathless. Someone had called the fire department, but no sirens came. A few neighbors had gathered, hands folded, eyes low. No one offered help. One man muttered something about bad wiring. A young officer handed her a clipboard. Faulty fuse box, maybe old wiring, he said. Happens a lot in these rehab homes. Lucky you weren't hurt. Noah drove her away without asking where to go. Neither spoke. The city passed in a blur. Her body felt heavy, as if it had absorbed all the heat the house left behind. His workshop sat near the river, a place that smelled of sawdust and rain. She sat on a cot in the corner, smoke still clinging to her jacket. Noah set a mug beside her, then stepped back. She didn't touch it. Everything's gone, she said, voice barely sound. I know. They didn't even care, just watched. Like I deserved it. You didn't. She gave a hollow laugh. He burned it all, Noah. The house, the files, whatever was left. And they'll call it my fault, a bad wire, a careless woman. Easy story. Noah said nothing. She rubbed her temples. I thought if I played it right, followed the rules, they'd leave me alone. But this, she gestured weakly, this is what's left. He sat beside her. He hasn't won yet. Elena didn't answer. You're still here. The drive's still in your pocket. And your name scares them enough to light a match. She stared at the seam where wall met floor. They took Jonah. I know. I don't even have a toothbrush. You can stay here, as long as you need. She nodded. Her body sagged into the cot. Noah covered her legs with a wool blanket, turned off the lights, and left her with the low hum of a generator and the creak of wood settling into cold. The email had no subject line, just a forwarded thread from a city account. She recognized the sender instantly. Her hand slipped from the mouse. The words blurred, location confirmed, backup drive recovered, risk contained. Enough to make her stomach twist. The name above it was Noah. Her breath slowed, but her body stayed rigid, as if something cold had passed through her. She found him in the back of the shop, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag. He looked tired, like he was about to say something soft. You told them, she said. He didn't deny it. I didn't think they'd come for you, he said, low and quick. They said if I gave them the location, they'd leave you and Jonah alone. That was the deal. You made a deal with him. Her voice cracked like dry wood. I was trying to buy you time. They burned my house. Noah, I didn't know they'd... She hit him, hard. His head turned with the blow, but he didn't move. No tears, no shouting. She grabbed her jacket, slipped the USB into her pocket, and walked out. The door closed without a sound. Detroit's wind cut sharp as rust. The streets felt off-kilter, wrong in every corner. Traffic hummed in the distance. She kept walking, nowhere decided. Then came the car, the same black sedan trailing half a block behind. She turned, picked up her pace. It matched her speed. At the next corner, she ducked into the public library, pushed through the slow doors, and moved between aisles. No one looked twice. A few teens by the computers, a man asleep near the window, a librarian handling forms. She found an empty terminal and plugged in the USB. Do you trust this device? Yes. Files loaded one by one, each second tightening her chest. She attached them again, typed the same note. If I disappear, look here first. Sent it to Grace Liu. Watched the bar crawl to complete. Then the screen froze. Her phone buzzed once, then died, battery gone. Behind her, a voice calm and too familiar. You really think you can win, Elena? She turned. Douglas Crane stood between shelves, coat-buttoned hands in his pockets. He looked like a man arriving for a meeting, not a threat. I told you, he said, stepping closer. Some things are better left buried. She stayed still. Her mind raced through choices, none good. I wonder what he told you, he went on. Noah. He was meant to report to me, but he went soft. That's the problem here, too many people trying to be heroes. Her jaw clenched. A librarian glanced up, then back to her screen. Crane tilted his head. You gave the files to the press, I did. He almost smiled. Then you've made your choice. She edged backward, hand brushing the shelf. There's still time, he said. Delete the emails. Hand over the drive. Walk away. Her laugh was dry. You burned my house down. I burned a liability, he said simply. Don't make yourself another one. She turned, slipping through the aisles, pulse hammering. His words followed, even certain. You should have taken the deal, Elena. Crane didn't move right away. The faint smirk stayed, like he already owned the ending. Elena stood frozen between the shelves, fingers clenched around the USB in her coat pocket, unsure if her knees shook or if the floor itself had started to give. Before she could speak, a woman's voice rose from the front desk. Elena Marsh, Grace Liu, stepped into view, holding up a piece of paper, as two police officers followed behind her. She was smaller than Elena expected. No makeup, just a tired determination in her eyes that didn't need to raise its voice. We've received a tip regarding misuse of public development funds. We have a court order for detainment. Crane turned, his calm cracking for the first time. This is absurd, he said, walking forward but stopping short when the older officer unfolded the warrant. Grace didn't even glance at him. She looked straight at Elena. You have the original hard drive, Elena shook her head. Not with me. We'll need it, Grace said low enough for only Elena to hear. The files you sent, they're strong, but the city won't move without the root source. We need metadata, timestamps, originals. Crane turned toward them, his voice now slower, almost condescending. Whatever she gave you was fabricated, probably stolen. The younger cop shifted beside Grace, but no one said anything. The tension wasn't loud, it just settled over the room like a weighted blanket. Elena's heart thudded. She took one breath, then another. Noah. The old words returned like they'd never left. If you find something, don't trust anyone, especially them. She remembered the old machine in the shop, the smell of sawdust. He'd never shown her where he hid things, but she'd always sensed a piece he hadn't spoken aloud. Something unfinished. It's not at my house, she told Grace. If we go now, we might get there first. Grace turned to the officers. We're moving. They left the library without another word. Elena didn't glance back to see if Crane watched. She wouldn't give him that. The drive across town was quiet. Grace gripped the wheel loosely, eyes forward. Elena watched familiar streets past routes she used to drive for deliveries until they turned onto the block where it all began. The workshop looked dead, windows, boarded, a rusted chain hanging from the back door. Elena knew where to press. The panel shifted under her hand. She crouched beside the workbench, brushed away dust, and reached beneath. Her fingers struck metal, a flat tin box taped shut. It held a hard drive heavier than the one she'd carried before, in a folded note. I made the wrong call. Maybe this puts something right. Be safe. N. She read it twice, unsure whether to feel grateful or betrayed. Grace stepped closer, but didn't intrude. It's everything. They didn't linger. The air in the workshop felt used up, like it still remembered. Sirens rose somewhere behind them. Grace quickened her pace phone at her ear. Elena barely listened. She held the drive in her lap as they pulled away. It weighed more than it should. An unmarked SUV turned onto the street they just left. Grace didn't flinch. She kept driving. Elena leaned back, muscles tight, her body aching, not from one night, but from the long accumulation of surviving. The morning news looped on every screen. Grace's voice carried through it, measured, steady. Documents confirm a network of shell companies tied to Douglas Crane's development fund. Millions meant for city renewal were diverted offshore. An anchor cut in Crane would appear later that day at the ribbon cutting downtown. Streets were already closed. Elena stood in the crowd before City Hall, coat buttoned to her throat, breath lost in the cold. Grace caught her eye from the press pen and gave a small nod. Elena didn't move. She didn't want to be seen. Crane stepped onto the podium flanked by suited men. His smile was stretched thin. Detroit is more than a name, it's a promise of rebirth. The screen behind him flickered. Instead of blueprints, Grace's report filled the display, his face, his company's accounts. The words embezzlement and fraud looping across the footage. The crowd erupted. Phones rose, sirens wailed. Crane froze, then turned sharply toward the steps. Two officers advanced. He shoved past, tripped on the carpet's edge, stumbled off stage. The hum of disbelief swelled into shouting. Elena found herself moving with the crowd across the plaza, down the narrow street that led to the bridge. By the time she reached the riverfront, the light had thinned. Wind off the water bit through her sleeves. Ahead, Crane's car sat blocked by police red lights flashing over the railings. He climbed out, still barking orders no one obeyed. "Do you know who I am? You have no right to detain me." Elena stepped closer. "Douglas." He turned. Recognition cut through his fury. "You," he spat. "You started this." She stopped a few feet away. "How many people like me did you take from?" He laughed bitter. "You think you're better. You wanted the same thing, security, a second chance. You just couldn't do what it takes. I wanted a home. You wanted someone to blame." He lunged, not fast, but enough to make the officers shout. His shoe slipped on the icy grate. He grabbed the rail, lost it again, and went over. There was no sound, only the rush of water below. Elena stepped forward as flashlights swept the surface. Nothing. One officer called for backup, voice clipped and low. She leaned on the railing, breath shallow. The river smelled faintly of iron and oil. There was no triumph in her chest, only a hollow stillness. Grace appeared beside her. "It's over," she said quietly. Elena didn't answer. She wasn't sure what over meant anymore. Sirens faded. The crowd stayed back, murmuring, filming. Across the water, city lights blinked on, trembling through the dusk. Elena turned toward them. Somewhere out there, Jonah was safe, she'd been told that much. She held to it like a thread. The wind shifted. A beacon blinked from the bridge tower, slow and steady. Grace's phone buzzed nonstop. "They'll want statements," she said. "Maybe tomorrow." Elena nodded. Tomorrow. The room was smaller than the one they lost, but it stayed warm. The shelter near Belle Isle gave them 2 beds, a shared kitchenette. The light wasn't pretty, more habit than grace, but it came without fail. On the table sat a cardboard box tied with twine. Grace had dropped it off the day before, called it something small. Elena waited until Jonah finished breakfast before opening it. Inside was a framed photograph, her face streaked with soot, eyes, red hair, wild. It had been taken the night firefighters pulled her from the wreckage weeks ago. Grace had written on the back, "You looked terrified. You also looked free." Elena ran her finger along the edge of the frame. She didn't feel free. She felt emptied out, like a body still remembering pain after the wound had closed. When Jonah came back from the playground that afternoon, his steps were fast, his voice carrying down the hall. "Mom, the lady on TV said your name again. Ms. Grace said you were the one who told the truth." He threw his arms around her waist, face pressed into her shirt. She let her hands fall to his back, the weight of him anchoring her to something real. "You're kind of famous," he said, muffled against her side. "I don't think that's what I wanted," she murmured. He pulled away just far enough to look up at her. "But you made the bad guys go away." Elena smiled, a small curve that didn't quite reach her eyes. For now. Most mornings she walked to the lakeside. The benches were worn, the path uneven, but the air felt lighter. She stayed until the ferries turned to dots on the water. Some days she thought about the fire. Other days she didn't let herself. The city was rebuilding again. New billboards, new faces, old promises. Crane's name was gone. No one ever found his body. Rumors changed each week, and she stopped reading them. Not knowing was quieter. One afternoon, she opened the drawer beside her bed. Beneath spare batteries and a chipped mug lay her old debt notebook, pages soft from years of worry. Water bill past due, rent extension, credit minimum payment only. Each line looked small now. She tore the pages out one after another until only the cover remained flimsy and bent. She folded it once and dropped it in the trash. From the hall, Jonah called, "Mom, I dropped the broom again." She took a breath that felt clean. Coming. Brushing scraps of paper from her lap, she crossed the room. Jonah knelt by the door, trying to lift the broom without tipping the bucket. He grinned, one tooth gone, another barely hanging. "I almost got it. I can see that. No music, no ceremony, just the rhythm of two people moving through an ordinary afternoon, rebuilding piece by piece. The courthouse smelled of varnish and coffee. People clustered in quiet knots, their murmurs filling the hall. The walls were the same dull beige as every government building Elena had ever known built, to outlast whoever passed through. Grace waited near the courthouse steps, microphone in hand, the red light blinking. Her voice carried through the open doors. Today's hearing marks the end of a 2-year investigation into the city redevelopment fraud. Former Mayor Douglas Crane is expected to face sentencing within the hour. Elena sat near the back. She hadn't come to testify or be seen, only to witness the story that had consumed her life reach its end. When they brought Crane in, the sound of his chains was soft but deliberate. The orange jumpsuit hung awkwardly on him, yet he still carried himself like a man who believed the room was his. His face had aged, but the arrogance hadn't. The clerk read through the docket. The prosecutor listed the charges: fraud, laundering, misuse of federal funds, racketeering. The numbers blurred: millions, missing families displaced. Then came her name, buried among others: Elena Marsh, resident of Ward 9, displaced by fraudulent repossession. Her chest tightened. She traced the seam of her coat sleeve to steady herself. A hand touched her arm. The woman beside her whispered, "Thank you for not staying quiet." Elena nodded, unable to speak. Across the aisle, Grace looked up briefly. Their eyes met, not for comfort, just acknowledgement. The defense tried to frame Crane as a man undone by ambition, betrayed by his team. No one bought it. When he stood, his voice carried just enough to reach the cameras. "You want a villain," he said, "but I only gave this city what it wanted someone to blame." The judge didn't blink. "You gave it theft." Then came the verdict: 25 years, no parole before 20. The room went still, then someone clapped once. Another followed. The sound spread like rain on concrete. Elena didn't join. She just breathed, something long trapped, finally leaving her. As Crane turned to be led away, his eyes swept the crowd until they found her. He froze, realizing what he'd become: an afterthought in a story he no longer controlled. Traffic hummed. Voices overlapped. For a moment, it sounded like the city breathing again. Grace finished her report, lowered the mic, and caught Elena's glance. A faint nod, nothing more. By the gate, Noah waited, hair shorter, eyes older. "I'm leaving Detroit," he said. "Work in Toledo. Thought I should tell you. You don't owe me that." I wanted to say it. He nodded once, then walked off. She didn't call him back. Some goodbyes didn't need words. Sunlight broke over the courthouse steps. The marble seemed to shine, not because it was clean, but because it had finally done its job. At the bottom, she paused. Flags moved in restless wind. Detroit wasn't healed. People were still fighting bills, still holding on, but justice at least had found its name. She turned toward the street, hands in her coat pockets, and began walking home. Maple Street looked different now, though the cracks were still there if you knew where to look. Work crews patched foundations, painted porches, planted thin trees in yards that hadn't seen green in years. Hammers kept an even rhythm, not hurried, not desperate, just work being done, because someone finally cared to finish it. Elena walked beside Jonah, carrying 2 grocery bags and a stack of papers from the city office. She'd been hired as a part-time coordinator for the Neighborhood Restoration Fund. It wasn't much, but steady hours felt like wealth. Their house stood where it always had, but the color was new, soft yellow siding, white trim. The roof no longer sagged. The steps didn't creak. Someone had planted marigolds by the porch. They looked too small for the space, like a promise still learning to grow. Jonah ran ahead and pushed open the front door. "It smells like wood, Mom, not smoke." She followed him in. The walls were smooth again, the floor even, light stretching across the tiles. The refrigerator hummed gently, a sound she hadn't realized she missed. On the counter sat the old coffee pot from the shelter and the chipped mug she'd never thrown away. She unpacked groceries: bread, milk, oranges, peanut butter. Jonah darted around, touching everything as if rediscovering it. Neighbors waved from the street, faces she hadn't seen since the first days of the program. Mrs. Callahan from 2 doors down paused long enough to hand over a tin of cookies. "Welcome home, sweetheart." Then she kept walking. The words stayed anyway. Jonah dragged a chair. "The lake looks closer from here," he said. "It's the same distance. Still feels closer." She brushed his hair and set a picture frame on the table. Grace's gift mailed last week with a note for the next chapter, not the last one. Inside a photo of her and Jonah on the porch, the lake faint in the background. His grin wide, hers looked like relief mistaken for surprise. She placed the frame beside the mug. They belonged together, something broken, something whole. Jonah appeared with a broom too tall for him. "Can I sweep? You can try," she said, pouring coffee. He made it halfway before the handle clattered to the floor. "Oops, guess I'm not good yet. You will be." He grinned. "Mom, I think this house isn't haunted anymore." Elena laughed soft at first, then freer, warmer than she remembered. Jonah looked proud for earning it. "Maybe it never was," she said, half to him, half to the house. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Someone outside called for a missing hammer. A car radio drifted from the next block. All the sounds folded together, the noise, the calm, the ordinary weight of a day moving forward. Elena opened the window wider. The curtain lifted. Spring air slipped through, smelling faintly of paint. Jonah chased his shadow across the floor, his feet tapping a rhythm that felt like life itself. Down the street, a hammer struck again, steady sure. Jonah began humming a tune without words. Elena turned toward him, smiled, and joined in. The light shifted slightly on the walls. The room felt lived in. Nothing grand, nothing final, just a home learning how to hold the quiet. Sometimes healing doesn't look like peace. It looks like choosing to rebuild brick by brick, even when your hands still shake. Elena's fight wasn't just against corruption. It was against the quiet voice that once told her she didn't matter. Every truth she uncovered, every step she took toward the light proved otherwise. May we all remember even the smallest house, the faintest hope can hold enough strength to start again.